Exposure to domestic violence where life on the streets was preferable to abuse, or another cruel government cut and the ranks would be swelled. Being on the run had opened Nino's eyes. He was wanted by the police, but his life was better than these people's. He continued deeper into the depths, past more huddled figures. An enormous rat scampered across his foot before merging with the darkness. Two wild-eyed men regarded him with intense gazes as he went by, but he stared back at them until they looked away. Someone in this tunnel had once been foolish enough to mess with him, and after what he'd done to that bastard, they'd all left him alone ever since. Their lives were hard enough without coping with only one ear. Down here represented sanctuary to Nino. It was the place he came to when he felt the desperate urge to breathe again, to be without the crushing worry of being caught, just for a little while. Glancing over his shoulder, ice filled his veins when he saw that tall, relentless figure several feet behind him, casually making their way through the tunnel. Most disturbingly, their gaze was locked on him, ignoring the crouching shadows lining the walls. Nino broke into a jog, anxious to reach the other side of the tunnel which would lead him outside. This tunnel no longer represented sanctuary. In fact, it felt more like a prison. The pinched faces peering at him, turning demonic, the walls closing in. He tripped over something, and down he went, landing on all fours in the muck and the dust. A bony hand clamped down on his left wrist, attempting to remove his watch. "Get off!" he cried, wrenching his arm free. Looking back, he saw the figure was even closer, and panic surged through him, his heart pounding, skin breaking out into a cold sweat. He was so afraid he didn't bother to punish the creature wrapped in blankets who had tried to nick his watch. Instead, he pelted down the tunnel, running even faster when he heard footsteps pursuing him. It was fortunate he'd spent a lot of time at the gym because it meant he wasn't even out of breath when he burst through the door at the other end into an alleyway, wild-eyed and panicking, superstitious fear coursing through him. However, now he was back in daylight, he felt a bit silly. No one came out of the tunnel after him. He'd let his imagination run away with him. Pulling up the hood of his jacket, he stepped out into the street, blending in with the crowd, keeping his head down. Usually he felt so unsafe in crowds, but after the tunnel it was a relief to be surrounded by people. Fortunately, it was a rainy, chilly day, and it was rush hour, so everyone was too concerned with getting home to bother with him. He left behind the busy street and turned down a quiet residential one lined with nondescript red-brick terraced houses, some boarded up, others in an advanced state of decay. Music blared from the open window of one house, setting off the dog barking in the neighbouring house. Nino was grateful he occupied the ground floor of the house at the very end of the street, away from those noisy bastards. He might be an ear-munching psychopath, but at least he had more consideration for his neighbours than those thoughtless sods. Gratefully, he stepped into his flat and shut the door, silencing the awful thumping music and the barking dog. He'd rented this place under an assumed name from a landlord who didn't ask any questions. In the flat above lived a Lithuanian couple who couldn't speak any English and who kept themselves to themselves, which was all the better for him. He pulled off his jacket and tossed it onto the couch. It was only then he noticed the thick silver bangle around his left wrist, just above the watch. What the? His body jumped and jerked, and he dropped to the floor, pain tearing through every muscle as he wondered what the fuck was going on. There was a thud from the direction of the front door, followed by a crack, and a figure stalked into the room, standing over him. The only detail Nino could make out was that in one hand they held a small black device, and their thumb was pressed down on the red button. When they released the button, the agony in Nino's body eased, and his muscles unfurled themselves. Now he was no longer in pain, he could get a good look at the intruder. It came as a surprise to see that the person who had finally got the best of him was, in fact, a woman. Quite a pretty one at that. Tall and willowy, with long dark wavy hair and large dark eyes. She wore a long black...